Namaste, namaste, and good evening, everyone. We will get started with the detailed descriptions of the strategies. That is the detailed Bhagavad-Gita, actually. The first and second chapter was just an introduction. Second chapter specifically was a total introduction to the whole of Bhagavad-Gita, which we saw in the last session. So let us take a look at that overview. We talked about the karma yoga as a win-win situation, a win-win attitude actually, which people can engage in, and then get into a state where they will be considered as a visionary, a seer, who is selfless, equanimous, equipoised, and rooted in the self. All this is possible only when one is completely rooted in the knowledge of the self. And the self, the characteristics or the nature of the self is was described as a summary in the second chapter. So the second chapter dealt with various aspects of infinite nature of our infinite potential in the first phase, and then the true nature of how we can get fulfilled in our works, the karma yoga aspect. And a bhakti aspect was briefly introduced that helps us refine our nature of the mind so that we are always inspired or we are motivated supremely by the joys of the self. So these three things, that is this work attitudes, the knowledge about the self, and the refinement, completely, these three things combine to give us this state of perfection, which was described in the last two verses of the second chapter. So that is basically the summary of the whole of Bhagavad-Gita. I would please, I request everyone to mute the mic unless they are speaking or asking questions. So this is the whole of Bhagavad-Gita, actually, as a summary. A very brief and an overview summary of Bhagavad-Gita given in the second chapter. And that is what is illustrated here through the various verses that describe the self, the karma yoga, and bhakti, aspects of bhakti, combining together to create the wisdom that we are looking at in detail from third chapter onwards. This is the essence. So what we see on the screen is the essence, and that's, in a nutshell, is Bhagavad-Gita. So it is about do your work, be inspired, and identify with it. Do your work, karma yoga, be inspired, bhakti, and identify with it, the knowledge. These, the karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and jnana yoga are thus summarized in the whole of Bhagavad Gita as a summary in the second chapter. Now we will look at more details of karma yoga, starting with selfless attitudes or patterns of selfless attitudes. Is basically what we are going to see in this chapter. Knowledge actually helps in gaining confidence as well as in structuring the concepts in our mind. The knowledge structure helps in anticipating the utility and efficacy of our own thoughts, as well as translating that into worthwhile actions. A structured mind is also a fertile mind with the capacity to even invoke memories and knowledge as if through serendipity. Which is the basic root of creative thinking and intuition and things like that. Work or engagement in action helps in gaining focus of the mind. So through work, you control your mind. And you are also able to develop dexterity of skills, precision in your work. That is the quality that we bring about in our work. The skill and quality of action also enable us to get into a state of inspired action, which is also called as the flow in work. And inspiration helps in transcending our physical constraints. This transcendental state enables great creativity and productivity. It helps us in getting into a state of acceleration in work, a kind of joy that you cannot describe. which is actually nothing but the transferring of the bliss of the self into your mind and action, the physical body. So that is the 3 stages. Knowledge-based inspiration that results in excellence is the true reflection of selflessness, or the true reflection of the power of the self. It is so because there are no extraneous considerations. It is purely intrinsic. All thoughts and actions are fully centered in the joys of the self. Thus, the fundamental pattern of excellence can be, described as knowledge plus inspiration plus dexterity is equal to selfless work. Now, that is basically the sum total of Karma Yoga. And now the rest of it are details, which are exemplified in chapter 3, 4, and 5, and then in 6. Finally, summed up in 6. It is worthwhile to look at what Adi Shankaracharya wrote in Gita Bhashya about this process of karma, bhakti, and jnana. Now, devotion to action is a means to the end, but not the directly to the end. But it is something that leads you to knowledge, devotion to knowledge. Devotion to knowledge, which is attained by means of devotion to action, leads to the goal directly, without extraneous help. So this is basically what Krishna told Arjuna, because Arjuna was initially a bit confused with respect to what Krishna was telling him, whether to do the work or to be, acquire knowledge and be a jnani. So that confusion is basically with which the 3rd chapter started, and therefore Krishna gave a summary, and that summary is captured here, and that's basically what Shankaracharya also talked about in Gita Bhashya, that the infographic, the simple infographic here shows that process. Devotion to action leading to devotion to knowledge, which leads to a goal. That is basically what is. It is not, these are not separate paths. Karma yoga, one path; jnana yoga, one path; bhakti yoga, another path. That is not the way Krishna is dealing with the subject. In fact, the whole of Bhagavad-Gita, if you look and knit it together, the various chapters and the verses, you will understand that all these 3 yogas are there, concurrently existing in all the strategies that Krishna is advocating to Arjuna. So, 3rd chapter, in terms of its contents, can be split into 5 groups. From the 1st verse to the 8th verse, Krishna is talking about the importance of duty. Then from 9th verse to 19th, so about 11 verses, deal with right attitudes to work, which is also, therefore, which is actually dealing with the path of sacrifice. So the path of sacrifice is definitely the right attitude. Then in 7 verses from 20 to 26, Krishna talks about ideal leadership characteristics, with the example of Janaka being cited there. From 27 to 35, the secret of success is mentioned. It is the pathway to success, and which includes that one particular sloga, which is 330, which is called as the secret of success. And finally, he winds up Karma Yoga by telling Arjuna how selfishness creates problems and how you can control the selfishness, and what are the factors that lead to selfishness. So understanding the factors that lead to selfishness itself is the first step in controlling selfishness. So that is the reason why Karma Yoga, initially the first chapter of Karma Yoga, which is chapter number 3, deals with this aspect of selfishness. So that is in general, in summary, the 3rd chapter. So now we'll look at the details a little bit, so that you get a clear understanding of what exactly that it all means. If you really look at the under the hood only, you will be able to see these things. So let us look at this selfishness, the fundamental selfishness. Try to understand what fundamental selfishness is. All our actions, our work that we do, they are done with our body, mind, and intellect. And we direct the motivations and the aspirations towards the satisfaction of the body, mind, and intellect. This is This is how generally every one of us exists in this world, in this transactionary world. In fact, you will say that, how can I live without that? Yes, true, it is true. There are certain limits to which you can actually take complete selflessness into practical work. But that is not what we are talking about. We are now talking about getting into selflessness gradually and, reducing the amount of selfishness as much as we can. So first you have to understand that selfishness is about work that is done to satisfy only the body, mind, and intellect. Now, the same actions which are work, when they are powered by the knowledge of the self, the understanding of the inner power that we are, as different from the body, mind, and intellect, then the real revolution starts. The BMI is still there. All our actions are done by the BMI only, through the BMI only. But the self is the overriding factor, the knowledge of the self, and therefore our supreme motivations for invoking the joys of the self in our actions is basically what is driving us. And that is the state of selflessness. When all our thoughts, and therefore all our aspirations and thoughts, when they are directed towards the motivations for the inner self, the joys of the self, that is when selflessness starts taking root. So that is, you can say, as the fundamental definitions of selfishness and selflessness. Now, we will look at this a little bit from a different perspective also, so that later on in chapter 9 we'll be able to connect with it. At that time I will actually connect this there. So suppose you are completely identified with your body, mind, and intellect, and you believe that you are the body, mind, and intellect. I am the intellect, I am my mind, I am my body. Then what happens is you are tied to your current or existing capabilities and to minor modifications of that. But the moment you shift your focus from the body, mind, and intellect to the knowledge of the self, that yourself, the infinite self, is powering your body, mind, and intellect, capable of making changes in the body, mind, and intellect, then what happens is people get more self-confident of engaging in actions in the world and thoughts and reformation processes, in developing new capabilities, acquiring new knowledge, skill sets, new capabilities, new competencies. So you can, in the practical sense, you can consider selfishness as a kind of, being fully engaged with only your existing capabilities and not being bothered about advancing your own competencies. Whereas selflessness is about having self-confidence and thus engaged in activities that can acquire and enhance your capabilities unlimitedly, in the sense of, keep on improving. That perennial process of improving your competencies is what practical selflessness is all about. And why should you do that is also a part of it, in the sense that you are not doing it for your egoistic ends, but for helping as many others as possible. So that's, understanding about this selfishness and selflessness and its practical application in real life. In fact, people engaged with existing capabilities is merely working in, terms of, just your basic kshema, that is just your own kshema, physical BMI is kshema, and selflessness means you are actually you are going into a state of yoga, that is karma yoga, the yoga of acquiring new competencies. Yoga and kshema. So, now we also look at another definition that we are talking about. Krishna was talking about actionless in action, as the state of selflessness. Selflessness is that state where your actions, even though you are acting in this world, you are actually actionless. So actionless in action, that is the kind of phrase that has been used to define this selfless mode of operation in this world. So just look at the first diagram where, there is this BMI and the self combined, and, it is working, it is going through this, our life, with lots of challenges facing, and you believe that in your limitations. Basically, what is happening is the self and the BMI are bound together in action, and there is disturbance. Whereas the knowledge of the self and the belief in the power of the self works like a shock absorber. You can see in the next diagram below, the self and the BMI. The BMI and the self, they are actually the knowledge of the self as the shock absorber is providing stability to actually the inner identification with your own self. The BMI is thus, even though the BMI is actually going through turbulence, you remain working in this world with a steady intellect. So diagrammatically, you can think like this. This is only to visualize the concept of actionless in action. The self is actionless in action. And that's basically what you should go to, that state of actionless in action, which is the nature of self. How can you do that? Through the knowledge of the self. By making your intellect steady. And that is the reason why there was this summary of how you become a seer in second chapter. So this is the actionless in action in an illustrated manner for you to actually take it into your mind and then strike it there, so that every day you remember this when you are engaged in action. Believe in your own self and not give in to the limitations of the BMI. So with this, if you actually engage in action, your sense of duty is the first thing that will be affected. And sense of duty is basically what Karma Yoga starts off with. So Krishna talks about duty and the various types of duties and why duty is important. And he says that whatever you do, even if you don't do your duty, you are still working in this world. You are doing things. So why do you want to do actionless? You actually do your things, act in this world, do your duties to the best of your abilities with the power of the self as the knowledge that is within you and which can help you to conquer any turbulence in life. So thinking about duties, there are various types of duty. The duties that we are all engaged in: regular duties and daily duties or daily duties. I mean, like in examples are given: abiding by social norms, laws of the land, care of the environment. All those things are part of regular or daily duties that you must perform. Then there will be life stage duties, like, for example, as a worker, as a professional, as a housewife, as a husband, as a driver, or whatever kind of things you are doing. That particular, or as a son, as a daughter, as a father, as a grandfather, etc. You have different types of duties, and you have to do all those, carry out those to the best of your abilities. Periodic and occasional duties like family engagements and engagement in voluntary and CSR activities like that. Social obligations about networking within the society, social service activities, etc. That are social obligations that we carry as human beings. So these are the different types of duties that we need to perform, and keep doing this to the best without any personal and very selfish motivations. When you do that, whatever you do, whether you fail in it or whether you succeed in it, doesn't matter, and it actually gives you that belief in the power of the self inside, and your allegiance to the self and the motivations for the inner self will work as a shock absorber for your turbulence in life. Then Krishna then talks about the path of sacrifice. The path of sacrifice is basically, you look at an individual, every individual, we all work in this world in the most creative, productive, enriching manner. That is our aim. Those are the actions that we perform in this world. And when these actions are geared towards, making sacrifices of helping as many others as possible, it becomes the fertile environment for you yourself, the individual, as well as the society. Your own creative, productive, and enriching thoughts and actions themselves become, enhanced through such actions. So that is a loop that happens. The sacrifice actually becoming the fertile environment for your further actions. And you can also look at sacrifices as the direct manifestations of the infinite. We talked about about that in the second chapter also, as the infinite, as the manifestation of coexistence and expansion, and therefore sacrifice is basically the physical manifestation of the imperishable that is in this universe as well as within our minds. In this universe as well as within our minds. So in the universe, translating it further into our own mind as thoughts and actions. So this is the basic infographic for the definition of actions and sacrifices and their interrelationship. And it is described as, in a kind of analogical situation, analogical picture. It says that Anath Bhavanti Bodhani, Ajanyat Anna Sambhava. That is action, sacrifice, rain, food, and beings. Actions are sacrifices. Sacrifices make become the rain for the food for the beings. So there is that food cycle kind of thing that is happening because of sacrifices, and the food and all sacrifices emerge from our actions that are infinite, and therefore it is imperishable. And it finally says that Brahma Karma Samudbhavam. Everything is rooted in Brahman. That is the ultimate message that we need to take. So whatever sacrifices that we make, whatever attitude of sacrifice that we exhibit in our actions in this world, it is nothing but the direct manifestations of infinitude or Brahman. So that is for verse number 14 and 15. We can actually look at the way we do work in this world, ideation and innovation, our thought processes, basically what drives our productivity, and that is basically what is driving the creation of products and services. Whatever we do, how we serve this world. This productivity and ideation, etc., are nothing but your, attitudes. They are based on the attitudes of sacrifice. All of this, and then only you will have a mindset of focus and dedication that goes into your work. And with that, when we do your work in anticipation, attainment, and enjoyment of global good goals, that is the joys of the self in physical manifestation, when we do that, what happens is there is sustainable products. So sustainability of product development and services, etc., are rooted in what is called as our mental focus as on what, and doing service to as many others as possible. It implies a lot of sacrifice on your own end. I will be posting these notes so that you can think about it, reflect on it, and then we can discuss also the practical application of these models that are described in the Bhagavad-Gita. And tremendous amount of wisdom lies in the third chapter in actually translating that into action plans. So the next few verses are really looking at those action plans. So Krishna says that there are certain attitudes that you have to bring forth into your thoughts and actions if you are to actually work in that sustainable fashion, being of service to the society. How can you do that? 4 fundamental attitudes are described in the verses from 9 to 19, about 11 verses, talking about the various aspects of attitudes, including the sacrifice, the mode of sacrifice that we need to bring forth. So these can be summarized. I'm going to summarize that into 4 terms: Yajna Bhava, Tyaga Bhava, Samarpana Bhava, and Prasada Bhava. These bhavas or attitudes. In English, attitudes, Yajna Bhava is about the attitude of cooperation. Tyaga Bhava is about the attitude of sacrifice. Samarpana Bhava is the attitude of dedication. And Prasada Bhava is the attitude of abundance, or I will call it as accept and move forward. You need to accept whatever you do with Yajna, Tyaga, and Samarpana Bhavas. You do your work with those 3 Bhavas, and whatever you get out of it as a result, you have to accept it. It could be successes, it could be failures, whatever it is. It could be average performance, average results. But you have to accept what you have get, and then evaluate and move forward by tweaking changes within yourself to see how you can actually further develop your competencies, and also how you can better serve the world. It is not about looking at the results and getting disappointed or highly accelerated. So yajna, tyaga, samarpana bhavas and the attitude of prasada bhava goes together. Prasada bhava, we will discuss a little bit more of the internal characteristics or the nuts and bolts level, items that can describe these particular bhavas. So I'm going to list that out, and I will be posting this also. We will not go into case studies because that is part of our self-analytics workshop for youth. But otherwise, take a look at that. Yajna bhava is about cooperative endeavor by sinking differences, rising above self-interests, working for a common cause with selflessness and the mindset of benefit for all. Now those are the ingredients of the Yajna bhava: service, cooperation, gratitude, and productivity. Tyaga bhava is about sacrifices, giving and giving up, about detachment, of cutting away distractions, of being committed with foresight, and your attitude of forging alliances, networking, and then trying and connecting with the right set of things, people, etc. Credibility, trust, and expertise are also part of this attitude of sacrifice. So it's about giving. It is about self-renewal, of keeping yourself enhanced throughout, and about detachment from the results, but at the same time working through a process. The third is samarpana bhava, or the attitude of dedication and also offering. Dedication and offering. All your work is done as dedication as well as an offering to the inner self. So work is worship, the love of work, care and efficiency in doing things, working without likes and dislikes, working without any prejudices, and selfless, of course. Selflessness will become a part of all these attitudes. And finally, the prasada bhava. It's about compliance, detachment, gratitude, equanimity, and service. Like, for example, in a very simple way, you can describe the prasada bhava as the attitude with which you actually go to a temple and then accept the prasada from the priest. Whatever he gives, he will take it. You will take it. You will not fight with it, or you will not, ask for more to the priest. And not only that, you will take it and then bow to the priest, use it, partake of the prasad, and then as you move away, you might even distribute that to others who are waiting or who may not have got the prasad. So it is about these different aspects of attitudes that go into this prasada bhava. It's not about just accepting what you get. It is also about sharing it, and then sitting down later and evaluating so that you can get better. So that is also another aspect of prasada bhava. So the four fundamental attitudes that make up a karma yogi are the yajna bhava, tyaga bhava, samarpana bhava, and prasada bhava. Now, with all the details that we have gone into, listed out here, without in the practical world, we can actually connect it with some of the modern strategies that are applicable in the workplaces for you to become very, very a key performer in the world, in the world of work. Right attitudes that are cooperation, sacrifice, dedication, accept, and move forward. Okay, these four component bhavas, and by looking at the details of it, you can apply these four bhavas into various kinds of strategies that are successful, that makes us successful. Like, for example, teamwork, taking initiatives, networking, about followership and leadership. There is two aspects: follower-leader partnership. And follower-leader. This follower is not a meek follower, but a knowledge-based follower. Leader similarly has certain characteristics, which again we are going to look at that a little bit, because Krishna talked about leadership also. whereas he may not have looked at followership, because followership is something that is embedded. The wisdom for followership is embedded throughout from chapter 3 to 18. So we will look at that followership characteristics. By the time we reach 18th chapter, we would have seen the various different types of followership strategies. Managing your own self. How do you manage yourself? How do you keep updated? How do you renew yourself? So many things, How will you bring work-life balance? All these things can actually be looked at in detail and then infused with these right attitudes of cooperation, sacrifice, dedication, and accept and move forward with the characteristics that were talked about previously. You can actually take it as an exercise kind of thing, and then look at, for example, teamwork. If you take teamwork, for example, which I had posted also, similarly take leadership, or take communication strategies or networking, and then see how each of these bhavas, you have to see that in detail, how each of those bhavas can bring forth a different quality of that particular strategy into your life, into your workplace. That is basically what, even we were looking, we look at that in self-analytics workshops for youth with practical, case studies, etc. But here at the moment, I am sure all of you are experienced enough to start thinking about the application of Bhagavad-Gita, the karma yoga practices into your daily work, by just simply getting the input from these notes. So that's why I'm actually introducing this concept here. And one of the things that we have seen here is that a sense of gratitude is something that is a very powerful mental attitude that we can possess in any of these bhavas. And that is also described here. This is basically connected to the Pancha Mahayajnas that Sanatana Dharma prescribes. The Pancha Mahayajnas are Pitriyajna, Nriyajna, Bodhayajna, Devayajna, and Brahmayajna. So what are these? Again, in practical terms, in 21st century or 20th century and 21st century parlance, we look at it. Pitriyajna is our gratitude, the expression of our gratitude towards forefathers and elders, and to past wisdom. So the something that we should actually be thankful for whatever we are now because of the past. It is to the past. Nriyajna is something into the present, the contemporaries, gratitude to our contemporaries, our present responsibilities, and the facilities that we have. In fact, there is in modern business strategies, we have this 5 C's concept: contemporaries, colleagues, everyone outside the organization, also colleagues within the organization, and also without competitors, the company itself, and the customers, the organization and the customers. So 5 C's. Then the third is the Bodhayajna, the gratitude that we should have to the environment and or our responsibilities to the lesser privileged, plants, animals, creatures, and the environment. That is Bodhayajna. And the Devayajna is another interesting aspect that is about the gratitude that we should have for our own inherent capabilities, the respect that we should have for our inherent capabilities. Without this respect, we will not be able to work towards enhancing our competencies. Because if you don't respect our existing competency, we will not work to enhance it. So we have to have that. And these are called as devas. Our inner productive capabilities are the devas that are resident within us. Skills, capabilities, knowledge, the power to create new things, your own productivity capabilities, and your value systems. These are all the devas that we have within us. In fact, that can still further be, split open and into various specific things that we have. For example, if suppose you are good in music, you are a good singer, you have to have respect to that capabilities, the vasanas that you have. And if you have that, then only you will actually do the right sadhana to actually enhance that as a musician. Similarly, any other capability, your math capabilities for math can only be improved. As a student, by working hard at it, doing problems, working through various novel situations and things like that. So this is Deva Yajna. That is, you are actually worshipping the Deva within you so that the Deva will in turn bless you. In fact, these are described in those terms in the verses, and I am giving the practical implications of that here. And finally, we have the Brahma Yajna, the gratitude to the infinitude. Gratitude to infinitude is about eternal wisdom, higher wisdom, harmony in this world, about the universal forces that empower us, global goals, finally leading to infinitude. So these are things that you can do every day. In fact, right from the morning till you go to bed, every day, whether at home or at workplace, etc., or in society, think about little bits of, Pitri, Indra, Bodha, Deva, Brahma yajnas that you can carry out. And, it is a good exercise. It would be a very good exercise for you to start with a gratitude journal. And, every day at the end, before going to bed, spend 5 minutes writing down at least 1 or 2 yajnas that you have performed in the day. About Pitri yajnas, maybe how you have worked towards enhancing previous knowledge and to create new knowledge, or to enhance something to a better way of doing things, etc. All those things are Pitri Yajna, and how you actually work to help others within the current contemporaries. Or Buddha Yajna, what did you do for the environment, sustainability, or whatever, inclusiveness, or our potentials. What did we do to enhance my own competencies? What did I do today? Well, all those things can be, at least 1 or 2 things from each of them you can do every day. But at least make a habit of writing a gratitude journal every day, and this is going to create a wonderful, change within our brain. In fact, writing a gratitude journal about, your gratitude towards the various things that are enhancing and uplifting your life, and what your roles are in doing the same thing. Thinking about that is going to create a refreshing change within your brain. In fact, it has been said that in modern neuroscience, that such an activity of thinking about gratitudes and spending some time really reflecting on it, writing down is a very good way of really reflecting on it, will help your prasada bhava, will help you to enhance your prasada bhava, the mental attitude of abundance, positivity. Mental attitude of abundance and positivity is enhanced through journaling gratitude every day. If you try this out for 2 or 3 weeks or a month, and then you will start seeing the general amount of positivity that is catching you up from within. In fact, it helps you to it helps the brain to release feel-good neurotransmitters like oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, etc. And it has been proved also that it happens. And in fact, if you try this, you will, you will like workplace. Let's say if you have a lot of pressures, and you every day hate going to your office or whatever, something like that. And I'm just giving a practical this thing. If you have that kind of a thing, I am sure that 1 month of practicing, trying to give gratitude to something in the office every day. Think about it in the night before going to bed. Write it down. Could be small things. Small things, like what your boss did, or what, your teammates did for you, etc. Whatever. It could be even extraneous, whether the office boy delivered coffee to you. Okay, I'm thankful to him. Think small things like that, if you can, and write down and put it down in writing. You don't have to show this gratitude to anyone, journal to anyone. Keep it as a secret. Keep it there, but write it down. Practice this for a month, and you will see changes happening within you. Because the changes first should take place within our brain. And from the brain, it is translated. Because the brain is the source within. And that source is powered by the universe. And that universe is powered by the infinite. And you are milking the infinitude of Brahman, infinitude, through the universe, the universal powers. And that universal powers is expressing in your brain as these neurotransmitters. It becomes the neurotransmitters within your brain. and it powers the brain to do things in this world in a very positive manner. Practice this regularly, and the brain gets used to it, and changes are going to take place. So, in fact, how actually this can be more effectively utilized is going to be talked about by the time we reach 9th chapter and all, because Krishna is giving strategies, and those strategies are nothing but strategies that actually exploit this infinitude in the user universe. And that is what Gita is teaching. That is the beauty of this scripture, because it is written in such a generalized fashion that throughout your life, you can, every day, every moment of your life, you will be able to tap this, milk this like a kamadhenu, milking the kamadhenu. It is endless possibilities, endless positivity, endless abundance is basically what will be the result of this. And the karma yoga is the first step towards that. The first few steps of karma yoga are being enumerated here in the first third chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita through 40 plus verses. So this is gratitude, the Panja Mahayajnas that Sanatana Dharma also prescribed. Because Sanatana Dharma, if you look at the fundamental concepts of Sanatana Dharma, it starts with the one, the many, and then, of course, how one of the many, that is each one of us, can actually milk this infinitude. If any of you have studied Sanatana Dharma academically and practically, you will actually get to know what Sanatana Dharma is. In fact, nowadays in India, we have this whole process of people going against or talking against Sanatana Dharma and all, and there are lots of rubbish being talked about Sanatana Dharma without really knowing. Those people are not knowing what Sanatana Dharma is my opinion. In fact, the way they describe on TV and all about Sanatana Dharma, I can very rarely see that they have absolutely no knowledge about Sanatana Dharma. That is the reason why ignorant people are, shouting out from rooftops. Really speaking, Sanatana Dharma is such that it gives us what you call as the fundamental ammunition for life. And that is the reason why it is called as Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana meaning eternal, Dharma meaning ways of life or principles of life and living. So when you say Sanatana Dharma, we are talking about, in English, it is what? Eternal principles of life and living. It has nothing to do with any religion. So we need to look at that. At least when we really start studying Upanishads, etc., and try to understand that, the knowledge-based aspects of Upanishads, we will really understand what Sanatana Dharma is. And Sanatana Dharma concepts are enunciated. One of the Sanatana Dharma concepts, in practical terms, is this Panjamahayajnas. More about the Sanatana Dharma aspects, as and when it is required, I will talk about that. We have seen the one, the Brahman initially, but then more details of the one we saw in second chapter, the self, and more and more of it we will be seeing. The nature of that one we will see more and more as we go through these chapters. And the nature of the many also we will start seeing, that various names and forms. We will see that again more and more in detail, and why that manyness comes in. That is all described. We will come to that. But from the Karma Yoga perspectives, one of the biggest aspects is about gratitude in terms of, infiltrating the bhavas. Yajna, Tyaga, Samarpana, Prasada bhavas. All these bhavas, with all the details that we saw, also has got this element of gratitude interwoven into this. And that gratitude, expressing that gratitude, we have a daily duty. The 5 Panja Yajnas. The past, to the past. Respect for the past. Enhancing your past knowledge, maintaining your past knowledge, etc. is Pitru Yajna. Present, the Nri Yajna, creating and applying your current knowledge. For what? To serve. To serve the community, to serve others as much as possible. And also specifically to the challenged and the less fortunate ones, the Buddhas. Buddha Yajna. Nri Yajna, Buddha Yajna. So we have the Pitru Yajna, Nri Yajna, Buddha Yajna. And why do you actually do how do you do all this, your actions in the present? exploiting and working through your productive capabilities. So you have to worship your inherent capabilities, enhance them through worship. So maintaining and enhancing. That is Devayajna. And offer everything to higher wisdom. That is wisdom and harmony is Brahma Yajna. So you have the past, present, productive capabilities and the challenged being giving you the opportunities for you to serve this world with the goal of the wisdom of harmony and higher level goals. So apart from the gratitude journal, one of the other things that you can think about is what each one of them, at least one each of these yajnas you can do every day, and probably note it down. I'm not asking you to add so many things. Gratitude, definitely you should write, but if you are interested, try to actually think of what Nriyajna, Bhutayajna, Pidriyajna, Devayajna, and Brahmayajna did I do today before going to bed. Think about it for a few minutes. And if possible, write it down, list it down, and then keep doing that. Slowly you will find that all the 5 gratitudes you will be performing, you are more tuned to performing these things over a period of time. Maybe it'll take 6 months, but by the time if you are practicing it every day, after 6 months, it will become a second nature for you. It becomes a habit. And then you will start seeing the changes within yourself. You become the seer, the Muni. Slowly you will transform yourself to a state of Muni. The Muni who is living in this world and serving society, helping society, enhancing yourself as well as the society. That kind of an interaction with the outside world of objects is basically what we are trying to achieve through this Karma Yoga exposition. So the 5 Panja Mahayajnas. Now, okay, with that, Krishna started talking about leadership. So he actually talked about Janaka, the king Janaka, and how he actually, though he was already perfect, how he was still doing work, and why he should do work, what type of work he was doing, how did he do the work. He was the leader par excellence at that point in time, okay, or some age at that. So Janaka's example has been taken here, and through about 7 slokas, he talks about the various characteristics of leaders and leadership. So I'm going to summarize that in our modern language also. What he talked about was unselfishness in actions, somebody who is committed to the overall welfare of his team members, etc., or citizens, somebody who sets an example to follow. So his thoughts and actions are examples for others to follow, the leader. It should be like that. So you have to think, we have to now start, if suppose you are in a leadership position in your organization or in society, or if you are aspiring to become a leader in your organization or in society, then what are the things that I should start looking at, observing myself and in relation to others? The 4th one is no unsettling influence. I, as a leader, if I am a leader, my thoughts and actions will not unsettle other people, the lesser people. And you should be having larger motives and larger goals. That's basically what we have been looking at through these various actions. So, larger motives and goals. Mentoring and transforming. Mentoring and transforming. Somebody who is able to mentor others is able to transform others. So these are characteristics of leadership that that we should all look at if we have to ever become a leader. So characteristics of leader with the example of Janaka was described like this. So it's about what leadership is all about, a work strategy that employs expertise and influence to convince a group of people to come together and accomplish a substantial task. That is the kind of modern definition that we can map onto this particular set of attitudes and nature that Krishna talks about. Expertise, knowledge and skills, influence, handling people, stakeholders, setting agenda, etc., and convincing others. So you can see the definition of leadership itself is talking about three things: expertise, your skills, your domain knowledge, and all those things, and how you can apply that for the welfare of society. Influence, how can you influence the people working with you, your stakeholders, etc., the society, the people who are affected. And how can you convince your own people, your leaders, your higher-ups, your lower downs, and the society. So these three things: expertise, influence, and the ability to negotiate and convince, are part of the leadership characteristics that Karma Yoga is talking about. So as a practical summary, established in the process, identified with the involvement with the people, etc. As that is basically described here. Listed here as a summary, which I'm going to post this so that you will get to know of this. So in summary, it is about, I call it as the self-analytics of leadership. It's about having three types of, traits. One is the knowledge quotient. It is called as the knowledge quotient. The second is the momentum quotient, knowledge quotient, momentum quotient, and the people skill quotient. Three things that make up a leader. So your knowledge helps you to envision, facilitate, and empower. Momentum is about your own, inner thrust that you give so that you can blaze a trail. In the sense, you set an example and then go ahead. Helping initiate processes, and also guiding people. People skills, developing perspectives, being unambiguous, and about your ability to mentor. So you have the leadership aspects that come into play, three things, which is knowledge, momentum, and people skills that are actually talked about as the traits of a leader by the example of Janaka. I've put it in modern language from the verses 320 to 326. Now, we are going to look at the pathway to success. So here, Krishna introduced the concept of the gunas, three gunas. So those three gunas are nothing but knowledge, passion, and ignorance. Sattva guna, Rajo guna, and Tamo guna. So knowledge is about efficiency, quality, and your ability to be inclusive. So if you don't have knowledge, the reflective aspect or the practical reflection of knowledge should come in these three things. I just summarized that as efficiency, quality, and inclusiveness. Passion, as one of the biggest thing about passion is that you have the capacity to put in effort, self-effort, and to also identify with what you are doing so that you have intensity and focus on what you are doing. And ignorance is about ineptitude, lethargy, and also evilness. So these are the three gunas that every mind is influenced by. So you can see how now the power of the self is now getting translated in your mind. And there are three things that control that: knowledge, passion, and ignorance. We can call ignorance as knowledge deficits. Those three things: knowledge deficits, and ignorance, and passion. These are the three things. Anybody is influenced by this. And because of this, these three things come in a kind of, a mix which we have to start fine-tuning. And how do you start fine-tuning this? Towards the end of these sessions, we will get to know more about that, because in chapter 14th, 16th, and 17th, more descriptions are given about these various aspects in daily life, in various things. We will come to that at that point in time. So here, one thing is about ego. we have ego. And this ego is one of the factors that actually diffuse your energies. For example, practical examples I'll give you in terms of living in this world and working in this world. How does ego affect you? For example, some people are considered, I know there are various situations. Like, for example, let's say you shift your job and you are considered as an expert in a particular thing, and then suddenly you get the greater opportunity or whatever, and you go there with that reputation for being an expert in that particular area. And then when you go there, you realize that there are more new things that you need to bring out. And what happens is, to keep your reputation many a times, what happens is you do not take risks because you don't want to fail. That comes from ego. It is called as talent curse. Your risk taking is affected, and sometimes some people work in comfort zones. Within, they don't get out and explore new areas for fear of failure. What is that fear of failure? The fear of failure is coming from ego. Now, if you look at it, that ego is a representation of your past. Ego is a representation of your past. Anxieties are the conditions in the present, because you are looking at the results, and therefore, your agitations affect you. Those agitations can also be supplied by your mental conditions, your own lack of knowledge, etc. So there are three mental channels, dissipation channels: ego, anxieties, and agitations. The past, in the present, and the future. To me, anxieties come because of you're looking at the results which are going to come in the future. So it is about the past, ego; the future, the anxieties and agitations in the present, the current situation. So past, present, and the future, there are various things that affect us. So Krishna says that you should not. You should actually Mayi sarvani karmani sanyasyadhyatma chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yuddhasya bhigadajjara. 330, that is considered as one of the core slogas of Bhagavad-Gita. The central piece of karma yoga, actually, it is the secret of success. That is, you should actually not waste your energies about the past, the ego. Reduce that. The future, be anxious of your future, and do not be agitated in the present. That is basically what this sloga is teaching us. So it is about the past, present, and the future being able to control your past, future, and the present. In fact, we will also take a look at how the BMI diagram, which Swami Chinmayananda had made famous. So I'm looking at that, just take a quick look at that, the infinite self, empowering our vasanas initially, and then, enlivening our body, mind, and intellect through the body, mind, and intellect, making us the perceiver, feeler, and the thinker, PFT, and perceiving what? Perceiving the objects of the world, feeling the emotions, and the thinker, ideating, thinking. So this is how we work in this world. So there are lots of places that fine-tuning is possible. That is basically how we look at the self, energizing the qualities of nature, the vasanas actually being shaped by that, and to the results of your actions. So past, the future, and the present. The past is about memories, the future, the expectations, and the present, ideas and emotions in the present. So we can control the past, future, and the present, knowing this, the way the self is exhibiting through us or enlivening us. So it is about shaping these past, the memories, and your expectations, and also the thought processes. So we need to actually fine-tune our learning, setting up of higher goals, and the capacity to recognize abstract and generalize things, etc. So these details we will come to when we go to the seventh chapter. Seventh chapter talks about that in detail. So at the moment, I just pointed out the areas that we can use to shape our own thoughts and actions in the world. Okay, so the secret of success is about avoiding the regrets of the past, anxieties of the future, and the agitations in the present, and then completely focusing on the joys of the self. No other thought should be there when you are engaging in action. And if you do that, you will attain perfection in what you are doing. Now, from 33 onwards, Krishna is talking about the refinement process of your mind. So he is saying that this nature, the gunas, they are an irresistible force. And attachment and aversion are the qualities of the sense. Then he says that the likes and dislikes, etc., arise within the senses and the mind. It is not about the self. The self is merely the power, enlivening the witness. It is these qualities of likes and dislikes, etc., come from within the characteristics of the senses and the mind. So understand that and do your duty. Do your duty and not others. That's what he says. He says that it is better to carry out your duties, even if devoid of excellence, than to carry out the duties of others well. Better is failure in your duty than invoking the dangers of undertaking others' duties. That is the analogical and the poetic manner in which Krishna describes in 335. If you really look at that at the nuts and bolts level, let us take a look at that. So the picture is shown here, the self, and within us, the qualities of nature and the results of action. I have, in a linear fashion, I have shown that. And it is love and hate or likes and dislikes that actually work through our mind. And the results are coming up. So we try to actually satisfy the body, mind, and intellect. When the self is engaging within our system as intellect and mind, and then actions in the body, the intellect, mind, and the body has likes and dislikes, or the characteristics of the intellect, mind, and body gives rise to likes and dislikes. And we try to satisfy that. This is basically what is called as others' duties. You are not the body, mind, and intellect. You are the self. So BMI is the other thing. So if we try to satisfy the BMI, what Krishna says is you are trying to do the work of the others. Like, for example, I dislike something. I'm angry. I like something. Likes and dislikes, anger, emotions, etc. are of the mind, and I work like becoming a prey to those things means I am working for my body, mind, and intellect. So you are doing others' work. Whereas intellectual balance, equipoise, we talked about those characteristics. And if you are able to work with the supreme motivations for the joys of the self alone, you are equanimous and equipoised. And when you are doing that, you are doing self's work. So your work is to do self's work and not to do the BMI's work. That is what Krishna is talking about here. So your bounden duty is to derive the joys of the self, not to derive the joys or the pleasures of the BMI. Your duty is to derive the joys of the self and not to derive the pleasures of the body, mind, and intellect. That is the important thing that we should understand. So who are you? I am the self. And others, the BMI is the other, your other. So we are now looking at these implications of Karma Yoga and its characteristics from within us. And then we will see how we need to shape ourselves. Because I am the self. I am not the body, mind, and intellect. If I try to do things for the BMI, then I am doing something for the others. If I am doing something for the self, then I am doing for myself, the real self. That is what Krishna is. Don't do it. Even if you actually start doing things for the joys of the self and then you fail or you are mediocre, that is fine. Then going for the pleasures of the body, mind, and intellect is basically what Krishna is talking about. Because the BMI might give you instant satisfaction and glories, maybe, but in the longer run, you are going to fail. So he says, now he talks about a little bit of that in controlling your selfishness, how you can actually, the elements that go into making you selfish is basically described here. I'm going to picturize that as a kind of animated graphics. So the same, the self working through our qualities of the BMI. When normally we are doing these things, what is happening is you are either fulfilled or not. And if you are not fulfilled, you fall to anger. If yes, then what is happening is if you try to satisfy those love and hatred, you become selfish. I mean, in the sense you become greedy. And so those become selfish desires. If you don't satisfy it, you fall down to anger. The ladder of fall described that. And selfish desires kill the self or hide the self from you, selfish desire, and burn your intellect. And you are destroyed. So that's basically what you can just follow the arrows, love and hate, whether it is fulfilled or not, in either way, one, you fall into greed and, destruction of the intellect because the self is forgotten. Self is shut out and you are destroyed by the flame of selfishness. So verses 337 to 343 describe this process. The body, the senses, the mind, the intellect, and the self. And the selfish desires are seated in the intellect, mind, and the senses. So intellect, mind, and the senses are the seat of selfish desires. And you could also see that the body is the grossest, senses the next grossest, mind again lesser gross, intellect becoming more subtle, and self is the subtlest of all. So it is gross to subtle. The grossest is body and the subtlest is the self, and it keeps on changing as and when you actually focus on the more and more gross things, then you fall prey to likes and dislikes. But the moment that you start expanding yourself to the joys of the self is the most subtle because it occupies infinitude. It is everywhere. Whereas the body is limited, gross. It is contained. Subtle, there is no restraint everywhere. That is self. So that is, so where do you actually need to focus is at the subtlest point, the self. And the next, the physical subtlest thing that we have is the intellect within our body. And that intellect is the point from where you can start controlling these likes and dislikes. So the intellect, that part of the intellect which helps you to control these likes and dislikes is termed as a subtle intellect. And the other side, which tries to satisfy the mind, senses, and the body, is called as the gross intellect. So intellect itself has two sides, the subtle intellect and the gross intellect. The subtle intellect, which is in tune with the self, and the gross intellect, which is in tune with the mind, senses, and the body. All of us have that. Two aspects to our intelligence. Two aspects of our intellect, which helps you to judge what is right and what is pleasurable. And then going by what is right is basically what is required. So, why do we not do that? That is because we are engulfed in this sattva, rajas, tamo gunas and selfishness that is created by sattva, rajas, tamo gunas. So, how do you actually control that selfishness? 3 steps are mentioned. More details come in various other chapters. But the summary is given here from verse 337-43. Within that, it is described. So let us look at that. The 3 situations. We have wrong or partial knowledge. Some knowledge is there. Okay, that is a sattvic aspect of it, the knowledge aspect. But sometimes some people have wrong ones and sometimes people have partial ones. The wrong ones can be corrected only through experience. So that's another thing. So wrong or partial knowledge. Then we have passion in partial knowledge. With partial knowledge, some people are egoistic, and then that is passion in partial ignorance. And there is this state of total ignorance. These three things. So I look at this now. If you are in sattvic to some extent, that is wrong or partial knowledge, you know a little bit of it. You are trying to gain knowledge. So acquiring knowledge, and the knowledge will help you to redeem. That is a very straightforward step. Your wrong or partial knowledge can easily be converted into full knowledge through acquisition of knowledge. Then passion in partial ignorance, basically you are having a mindset of ignoring knowledge, and you are not ready to change fast. Then what happens is, you first need to develop a sense of purpose for for these sense of purpose in learning the value systems, and also in applying the value systems, and then converting the attitude of ignoring knowledge into acquiring knowledge. So it is a tougher step. So that you become goal-oriented and you can redeem yourself from ignorance. The third step is total ignorance. It's very difficult. You will suffer ignorance, the pains of ignorance, before you actually start getting into a state of trying to understand knowledge and gaining knowledge. It is a tougher three-step process, and there is more difficulties involved. So, you need to control your ego and start acquiring knowledge. So that intellect is first readied up, and then the intellect teaches the senses to control the senses, the pleasure-seeking habits, and thus you become converted through a tougher process. So Krishna says, as fire is enveloped by smoke, mirror by dust, and embryo by amnion, so is knowledge hidden by selfish desires. Selfish desires is basically what is creating this ignorance. That is 328, verse number 328. Dhumrena vyade vanir. That particular sloga is talking about the fire and the smoke relationship. That is, if suppose fire is hidden by smoke, then what is required? It is mere wind is enough for you to remove that smoke and flame the fire. That is an easy sub. So if you are sattvic, knowledge oriented and wanting to change, then it is very easy. That is what it says. Then mirror dust. That is dust. If suppose a mirror is dusty, then you need to actually clean using a cloth. So you have to put in right effort. Then only that mirror will become clean. Little bit more effort than a wind. And the third is embryo and the womb. That is people who are suffering tamas. You have to actually have gestation period, suffering through pregnancy, and coming out into the world, all the pains of birth, etc. That is basically what it is equated to. These are all analogical comparisons. So if you want to really throw away your ignorance and thereby selfishness, if you are sattvic, then it is easy. If you are rajasic, it is slightly more tougher. But if you are tamasic, it is much more tough. That is basically, in very fundamental terms, what he has described. And therefore, there is a pattern for quelling selfishness that is described here, which I have summarized as a kind of infographic, which I will post. So intrinsic motivations provide you equipoise and equanimity and dexterity. And this equipoise, equanimity helps you to control your senses. Dexterity develops and your actions become selfless. And how do you actually define this intrinsic motivation? It is coming from self and from within us as the self-effort to do wanting to do something unselfish. wanting to reform yourself, in anticipation, attainment, and enjoyment of the joys of the self. That is intrinsic motivation. So this helps you to sublimate our ego. And that ego sublimation helps you to become equipoised and equanimous and dexterous in your actions, helping to control your senses, and thereby you becoming selfless in action. So putting in self-effort in anticipation of this joys of the self is basically what prasada bhava is all about, and the actions should also come with these yajna, tyaga, samarpana and samarpana bhavas. You will be able to conquer your intellect, the subtlest of it, the intellect, and then the emotions, the mind, and finally the senses will automatically follow. So that is the process that Krishna says in terms of how you would eliminate ego and then control your thoughts and actions in this world to become a selfless person. So, looking at these bhavas, the gratitudes, etc., and also understanding the process of, throwing away ego, because ego is from the past, and therefore you become, you look at the past and then you control your present, means there will be problems. Similarly, don't look at the results, anxieties of the future. So the past and the present, etc., is to be controlled. That is the secret for success. And then we looked at how your ignorance can actually be controlled depending upon your inner nature. There are various steps that is to be followed, and some of those steps will be looked at in detail later, 4th, 5th chapters. This is a summary. This is the summary of Karma Yoga that Krishna talked about. How to become, powering your selfless actions through the power of self. Powering your actions with the power of self is basically what Karma Yoga is. So we looked at the various aspects of selflessness, leadership. First, we started with the duties, then attitudes, then we looked at sacrifices and gratitude, and then we looked at leadership and how what are the obstacles to your ignorance or selfishness, and then how do you redeem yourself, and finally a pattern of selflessness was summarized. So duties, we looked at the various types of duties as the initial slogas. Then we looked at the sacrifice element. What sacrifice is basically the manifestation of Brahman within us. And then we looked at attitudes of yajna, tyaga, samarpana, prasada, bhavas, and how each of those are constituted with, and then how we can apply that. Then we saw gratitudes, the 5 types of gratitudes that we can perform every day, and the obstacles that come, because of course the leadership aspect, and then finally the obstacles about the gunas, sattva, rajas, tamo gunas, and how these 3 in combination create a lot of issues for us. So it is increasing sattva guna, and the knowledge part is basically what is talked about as the ultimate solution to redemption from selfishness, and thus selflessness is about applying the joys of the self in all our motivations, so that our intellect, equipoise, mind, equanimity, and the skills of the physical body are enhanced, which helps us to control our senses and become selfless. So that is the Karma Yoga in general. In a summary, we can actually start thinking about applying these things in everyday life, in everyday work, in everyday living, and see how we can reform ourselves. For that, I would like you to start reflecting on the contents and then trying to find opportunities so you can apply that. And I think that this is the summary of the 43 verses of Bhagavad-Gita. If there is anything that you would like to clarify, I will look at that before I wind up with prayers, because we have some time, at least half an hour more to discuss. So, yes, Ajit.
Namaste, sir.
Yeah.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, sir. So, in fact, I mean, it's a beautiful explanation that you gave. And this time, what I did was, I actually prepared myself, to read the entire thing before going through the infographics. So, my question here is, sir, it's a small reverse engineering I'm not talking about. I mean, let me see if I'm able to phrase it well. Let's say today science tells that there is something called quantum entanglement. That means, if in a very simple format, whatever you think then actually can get manifested in some other part of the. I mean, it can reach out anywhere. I mean, it's boundless. That's what is being said. So, having said so, now when we go backwards, that means we need to have a situation where we have all the three forms of desire which we spoke about, and the three forms of the tamasic, the rajasic, or the sattvic desires. We need to actually conquer them, or maybe destroy all of them. And by that probably if the knowledge of the self is acquired, so that can actually lead to probably I was just thinking that might be if you have the right kind of thought, and the purest of the thoughts, I think manifestation is what, and that is what even science also proves it. So I think there's some secret, I'm sure, in this infographic itself, which I'm trying to understand. But a small hitch over there is, see, like we spoke about the Rajasic, the Tamasic, and the Sattvic desires. Even in Ayurveda, they talk about the Pitta, Kapha, and the Vata doshas. But that's not only about the body; that's also about in the mind also, it seems. So what they tell is, it is actually inherent in us, these three states of the mind. Let me talk about the mind, not the body first. So the kapha, the dosha, he behaves, his intellect or his thought process is different. All the three thought processes are different for kapha, pitta, and the other one also. So in that case, to make this ultimate transformation of or the knowledge of the self, or to destroy all this vasana, senses, and all, something needs to be done in the DNA level itself. Is it, or will it not change? Will it change? Is the question, sir. If I've been able to, I don't know if I've been able to articulate it better.
Yeah, I mean, what you are talking about is the practice, and the practice basically makes changes, because we have the tool to make changes, which is
yes.
We talked about neuroplasticity as one of the fundamental characteristics of that device, which taps these universal forces. So the neuroplasticity will help you to do that. Definitely will help. In fact, neuroscience is also talking about these positive, abundant mindsets and constant practice of what you have to do with the persistence and consistency. Persistence and consistency are the two the language that the brain understands. I mean, there is no other language. Persistence and consistency. So if you do that, things will start making changes. For that, you have to put in self-effort initially. So what are the characteristics of self? When you say, okay, self-effort, it is very easy to say that you have to put in self-effort. People say that is basically what everybody says. Okay, so self-effort. I know that you have to put in self-effort, but then how do you get started? And what exactly is putting self-effort? So we have to look at that aspect also. The mind, the characteristics of the mind that can help you to put in self-effort is basically what Krishna actually tries through Bhagavad-Gita. In 8th chapter, there is discussions about that. So we will come to that later. So how do you actually have a mindset that will help you to put in self-effort is basically what we should all be worrying about. And then we start understanding it and then believing that, yes, that will work. Then you will start. You have to take the start, first step, the second step maybe, and also the third step by force. Thereafter, it becomes easy. That is basically what neuroscience says.
So, in fact, that is understood. Only thought was, going back to the, let's say, isn't it inherent in us, these three type of different qualities? So, will we be able to crack that? Is the thing?
Yes,
if supposing something is inherent, how do we crack that? Because this is a very good tool to crack, but how do you get about cracking that? I mean, the next step.
That is basically what I am talking about. How do you get about cracking that? These three are inherent, meanings they are inherent in this, but then it is controllable.
Yes. Okay.
It is just something like, the rheostat or something like that, where you change that and then different, you can change the voltage levels and current, something like that.
Okay.
So it is these three things are inherent in our mind. Yes, doesn't mean that they are set in stone.
Okay, it can be.
That is the reason why there are different types of people. There are people
correct, absolutely.
Yeah. So it is a question of your, trying to understand your sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic nature first.
Oh, sure.
And then trying to tweak this required amounts of rajas and tamas, keeping a required amount of tamas, because tamas is also required to keep it. Required tamas is to be kept, but the others to be eliminated. Similarly, rajas, some amount of rajas is required, some not required, some kind of rajas not required at all. So what is the kind of rajas, or what is the kind of tamas that you should throw away? And how much of it is required? All these things are required. So you need to really understand how and what these things are. And that is the reason why chapters 14, 16, 17, and 18, they contain lots of information about the various aspects, sattvic intellect, rajasic intellect. What is it?
Sure.
Sattvic kind of food, tamasic kind of food. What is it?
Sattvic that influences.
Sattvic kind of fortitude, tamasic kind of fortitude, sattvic action for tamasic action. So many other various aspects of the sattva, rajas, and tamo gunas are dealt with in detail in those chapters. If we try, we'll go through that. And when we understand that, okay, in one shot you will not understand, but then you will have to start thinking of how each one of them are affecting you and how you can come. And when you start tweaking those knobs, then you will start maximizing your purpose of existence in this world.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I will talk about as the purpose of existence.
Certainly.
So it is definitely not set in stone. And if it was set in stone, then there is no point in going through all this wisdom, isn't it?
No.
So it is not fixed. There is something that can be tweaked, manipulated.
True.
So what is it that you can do to change this? First of all, to understand and then to change.
Absolutely.
So, to understand this sattva, rajas, and tamo gunas is the knowledge part of it, actually speaking. What it is, what sattva is, what rajas is, and how sattva and rajas or tamas reflects in various, our intellect, in our senses, in our mind. How that, understanding that is what is knowledge. Tweaking that, fine-tuning this through actions is karma yoga.
True.
And the motivation to do this. Why do I want to change this? Leave it as it is. Why do you want to do that? Motivation to do this, so that you actually maximize this is the refinement of the mind, which is bhakti. So how, when you actually start refining your mind by working through these mechanisms through the karma yoga, what are the characteristics of your mind that will shine through as behavioral characteristics from within you is basically what the bhakti yoga is talking about. In fact, chapter 12, Bhakti Yoga, verse number 13 to 19, is listing out something like 32 such characteristics.
Oh, yes.
And if we start looking at that in detail, and then trying to understand each one of those characteristics, then you will start realizing how you can tap more and more. So it is not one step or one chapter process. It is we have about almost 600 verses or 700 verses in total, dealing with the details of how we need to look at that. And for that, you have to look at each one of those words and the words therein and try to understand. Simple things like, Bhakti Yoga. In Bhakti Yoga, he says a Bhakta is an aniketa. In the sense that is somebody who does not have a house. So, somebody who is not rooted to a house is basically what it says, and that word. And you have to look at that in 360-degree perspective to understand that. It is not that, if you don't have a house and you are roaming around in the streets, you are a bhakta. That is not what Gita is talking about. Gita is talking about your mindset, your intellect's position. Are you stubborn? Are you stubborn?
Hmm.
And you stick to your viewpoints only. Always. You are not ready to change. You should not be that. You should not be sticking to a route, to a position. And that is basically what this idea is all about. So many, you have to look at that. We will look at, I will list out those details when we come to 12th chapter. So it is something that we need to actually constantly reflect upon, trying to look at in detail, and then mapping it into our real world situations and trying to do something about it. That's what basically. So we'll do that process. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that detailed explanation. Thank you, sir.
Divya. Yeah, Divya. Not yes. Yeah, Divya.
Hi. Thank you. I wanted to discuss with you on what we were discussing on the group earlier, and we were to discuss further on what would sacrifice mean in the modern day.
Yeah.
So, could you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, I mean, some simple things like, for example, various, there are various aspects of sacrifices. So I was talking to you also about, let's say, we looked at sacrifice in managing self, for example. Okay. One example, managing self. Like, for example, managing self is about, one of the aspects about the modern day workplaces, and all of you enhancing your competencies, and therefore you can contribute more to not only the organization but also to society, etc. For that, what is required is a constant, a lifelong learning process is one aspect of it. Okay. So, for example, normally till about the age of 20 to 25, what are you doing?
Learning, studying.
Learning, studying. Study is mostly, most of the people are engaged in studies, etc. What are you doing through studies? You are building. You are building up.
Right.
Now, once you do that, and once you complete your studies or whatever, you go into a profession, let's say. Okay, and then you start what you call as you enhance your experiences, right? That stage. Enhance your experiences because you come with some knowledge, and now you are trying to enhance your experiences through working. And on the job, understanding the things and studying. So after some time, what happens to you? You become proficient in what you are doing. And then the next phase of your professional life will be a consolidation phase. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. So, you are almost like you are going into a kind of what is called as a cruise control kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you are in a build, enhance, consolidate. These are the three things that happen in our jobs, workplaces. Suppose, typically what happens is, if in the current scenario, I could say, let's say at about 25 years of age, you start working. By the time you are 25, 28 or something like that, you would have become experienced enough such that it becomes a consolidation first for you around 28, 30 or whatever. And then a couple of years later, you realize that you are stagnating if you don't do anything. You can, because every day is happy for you now, because smooth, nothing to think. You are not thinking, you can do. Just like, when you are driving, initially you are conscious about your clutch, lever and all, gear and all those things. And after you become an expert, it becomes second nature. Just like that, you are continuing to actually exist in this profession in a cruise control mode. I think, you understand. So it is build, establish and consolidate. So unless and until you actually start another build process during the consolidation phase, soon you will be actually lost in what you call as crisis, stagnation crisis, isn't it? Right? Okay. So there is this being, if you want to really build through your consolidation phase, you may have to make a lot of sacrifices. Okay. Sacrifices in terms of, maybe time, effort, finance, everything. Suppose your company is not allowing you to enhance yourself by, acquiring new knowledge or something like that. And you then say that, you complain that, oh, the company is not doing that, why should I? If you do that, ultimately the loss, you will be the loser. Correct.
Right.
So if that is the situation, you may even put in your own resources and do further, acquisition of knowledge, etc. So BCE, the next phase, second phase of B, coinciding with the E, the the consolidation phase, BEC. So if you can actually start doing that, about 20 years back, I would say each of those phases could be around roughly 5 years of 5 years. 5, B, E, C, 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. 15 years, you will stagnate. So somewhere between 10th and 15 year, you will start another build phase, and it goes on. Maybe by the time from 25 to maybe around 55, 60 years of age, you need to do 3 or 4 new, what you call, build phases. 3, maybe 3, and then you will survey up to 60 years of age. But in the current scenario, I think it is 3 years. 5 instead of 3, 5, it should be 3 years, more faster. So maybe 4 or maybe 5, what you call, build phases are required to keep up your professional competencies. So you need to sacrifice a lot of things. As I said, resources, time, and then physical resources, time, money, and all those things are required. So your attitude to actually enhance yourself. Why do you enhance yourself? Not for selfish means, of course. That should also be taken care of. That is what Gita is talking about. If you are doing that for the purpose of enhancing the organization that you are working, or the product or project that you are working on, or to serve the society, keep on doing these kind of things throughout your life. That is an attitude of sacrifice that you are bringing forth into your daily living. Similarly, in various other taking initiatives, for example, is something that you can actually practice this act of sacrifice. In fact, I will give you one small example of very, very small example, but practical example, which stuck with me, over the years. This is something that Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam had mentioned, and sometime during the 1980s, sometime during the middle of 1980s or something like that, when he was not, not at that point in time, he was more of a missile man at that time, only a missile man, and then later he became the DRDO chief and then the president, etc. But at that time, I remember once, one of the things that he told us, simple things. At that time, there is no internet, email, and things like that. Okay, so he was talking about managing projects. He said that, if you are, especially he was talking to youngsters, the lowest level, the beginning, the entry level. We were at that point, entry level. So as entry level scientists or executives or whatever, scientists, you are, maybe 1 or 2 years into the profession, and you are starting to work on some projects, and then you work with your project leader, and then you come up with some designs or something like that, and then you want to get it approved before you actually start putting it or implementing it. What happens normally is that you put it in a file and then keep it on your desk, and then the office boy comes, picks it up, and then gives it to your department head or project lead, and then he looks over it, and then he gets it back, and then it takes normally 2 or 3 days for it to travel up and down the lane. Instead, he was saying that, as you just take the file, you go directly and meet your project leader, talk to him, and then you probably save 48 hours or 72 hours. You save that 2 or 3 days by just simply doing the job of the office boy. Why should you wait for that? These kind of attitudes. And similarly, he was also talking about, if you want to do something or convey something to somebody at the speed of a letter. If you write a letter, normally take 3-4 days. So in 3-4 days, that's fine. If you want to do that, think one step ahead. Use fax. And if something needs to be done through fax, take up the telephone. And if something has to be talked over the telephone, better to actually not take up the phone, but directly go and meet the person. One step ahead of what is required. That is a kind of initiative that you do. For that, you have to actually attitude brings in these yajna tyaga samarpana bhavas, and as well as, the sacrifice element is part of that. It actually encompasses yajna tyaga samarpana prasada bhavas, all things together. You have to combine these things together to actually, this is a taking initiative thing. And what is taking initiative? In this case is about, forgetting about the normal protocols, red tapes or bureaucracies, and then doing it yourself. Don't let your ego come into, I am a scientist, why should I carry the file? If you think like that, that's it. So this is basically what he was trying to tell us at that time. And I still remember that, because those were wonderful messages that, I thought it was all practical Bhagavad-Gita being talked about by him at that time. So there are so many things like that you can bring in this yajna tyaga samarpana prasada bhavas, that you can bring in to the daily ways of thinking at work and to make changes. And I think I hope I clarified your query. Yeah.
I have a small example, like on a day-to-day basis as well, like which is not directly linked to the work front, but on self-development part. Like after work in evening, you may want to watch some television, which is a very normal thing, and that is like you're feeding into your BMI, right? And instead of that, if you don't watch TV and you read a book, which is self-development book, that would be something you're doing for the self.
That is
So
right.
that would be the sacrifice of self.
The only thing is, there is also the other aspect, and don't take it to the too much to the extreme that you become kind of machine or something like that. Definitely there is some enjoyment also required. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
In fact, it is how you reflect on these verses, the meanings that it conveys to us, and then how you connect it with the opportunities that are available in our daily interaction with the outside world. That really makes learning the Bhagavad-Gita a worthwhile effort, if you really do that, And then you can actually start seeing a lot of changes. In fact, personally, you can experience what you call as the joys of the self, by doing that. And you need to therefore look at look under the hood of these chapters. Like, for example, Karma Yoga is this, and now next is also Karma Yoga, but it is Jnana Karma Yoga, Sannyasa Yoga, which is basically, it's about ingraining knowledge into this process of selflessness. Ingraining knowledge, ingraining thought power into selflessness is basically what fourth chapter is talking about. And then, of course, renunciation, about likes and dislikes, etc., the fifth chapter, and then about meditation, focus, flow, etc., in the fourth chapter. So there are about 200 and odd verses which describe various aspects. So naturally, 200 verses are not hollow. There are lots of stuff in it. So we need to look at that. Like, for example, the 30 or 40 slogas of third chapter talks about various concepts. And some of it may not be in detail, but we need to start simulating that and then trying to connect that with the next slogas that come. And then after the sixth sloga, sixth chapter, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th, and the 12th, the 6 chapters talk about this refinement process of bhakti. And then the knowledge of self also comes into play in 7th, 8th, and 9th. Several the nature of self is actually enumerated in 7th, 8th, and 9th. And then if we can connect that to practical ways of thinking and existing in this world, and to start making some changes, then you will see a lot of light. 7th, 8th, 9th. And then, of course, the 10th and 11th chapters are kind of more of a practical, what you call laboratory kind of thing, demonstrating certain things, which I will talk about later. And 12th is bhakti. And then comes the jnana part of it, where you are trying to understand these gunas and how your intellectual powers, intellect's capabilities can be utilized to differentiate between what is right and what is pleasurable, thereby tweaking the sattva, rajas, tamo gunas, 13th chapter to 18th chapter. So many things are hidden in these things, and we will definitely start looking at it in that practical manner as we go along.
Thank you.
Satish ji, I just wanted to add on the subject of that sattva, rajas and all being, tamas and all being in us. Now, actually, I think, isn't that the most inspiring part of it, that all of us have these downside, but we can all come up to the upside. And also, second thing is like the example that the first person said was in Ayurveda. So there is actually when he says, when we are identified as belonging to a certain type of dosha, then they suggest a kind of diet for us, pathyam and all. They say that you should not eat this, you should eat this, kind of a thing. So so apart from just changing our thoughts, there are physical things that we can do to change our tendency, our natural tendency, which is obviously, if you are at a child level, the tamas level may be higher, but because we want to change, we can raise our self to realize the infinite self by changing our food, by changing the physical exercises. Like yoga is also supposed to bring out more of the infinite self. Reveal more of the infinite self in us, to us, instead of being caught up in our thoughts and all that.
Yeah, I mean,
I have
connections.
one example. I have one example. Like for me, in childhood, like I used to hate maths. I don't know whether it, so how it happened, but I used to hate maths. But as I grew up, I realized that this was very essential for me in life, and so I had to find a way to develop interest in maths. So searching I came across this Vedic mathematics, and those things kind of hooked my mind onto it. And then a time came where I was actually taking Vedic mathematics for summer camp workshops and all that. I don't claim to be mathematics expert, but what I'm saying is, again, this is the perfect example of how you can go from being tamasic to sattvic, a higher level, by pursuing something with dedication.
Right. Okay. So that is the core of the thing. The core message of the Bhagavad-Gita. It is not about specific things like, people have used some of this knowledge in Ayurveda. I've used it in this kind of Vedic mathematics learning and things like that, or in yoga, pranayama, etc. All those are specific things. But Gita is not talking about the specific things of how you do yoga, etc. Because you can say, if you look at 18 chapters, you will never find yoga practices, because that is not the subject of Bhagavad Gita. The subject of Bhagavad Gita is about the body, mind, and the intellect, and the revolutionary changes that you can make to the BMI through the disciplines and structures that we can bring about in our thinking and in our action. So definitely, yes, all of this, the examples cited by you and others, yes, it is possible. You can connect to that. That will be definitely, you can investigate and try to connect that. But in the Bhagavad Gita, we are going to look at that, what you call as the psychology of change, in terms of how our mind and intellect will make changes. So we will be focusing on that. And as you said, yes, definitely, these disciplines are basically what makes changes. And as Ajit was also talking about, it is the brain that is helping us to make these changes. And that is powered by certain forces, one of which in the practical world is called as neuroplasticity. And that neuroplasticity is enabled by the forces. And if you look at that, all these things play into that ultimately, and that is what makes us more flexible. That is what makes us fluid thinkers. In fact, in the modern parlance, in the cognitive language, what we say is that we are fluid thinkers. Fluid thinking. Fluid thinking is about thinking fluently, as well as being able to make changes when it is required, and also to be able to think in ways and means, not in any planned manner also. I mean, like intuition, creativity, and all those things. Flexibility in terms of making changes, and also following procedures and following proof, etc. So that is basically all these aspects come into fluid thinking. And the only species on earth that is capable of doing that is human beings. And that fluid thinking is to be enabled. And Bhagavad-Gita, kind of a scripture, is basically doing that. And that is basically what Krishna did to Arjuna. Arjuna was a fluid thinker, and that is the reason why he was not stubborn. And therefore, he was able to make adjustments and changes to the way he was thinking, and therefore to do things that helped to create a different world later on. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so before I stop, I would, Anandji, I would like to hear your few words, and then we'll do the Pranava Mantra. And then...
Yeah, see, actually, you know what you said about that journal.
Yeah.
That gratitude journal. It's a very, very good tool for self-development. We can even make a diary, every day's diary, and then in that we can chart the gratitude. Most of us become ingratitude, not because we get something, others get more than what we get. When we see somebody has more than us, then we start worrying about it. There is a nice experiment done by one teacher. Right? He called one student. Of course, this was more or less manipulated. He called one student and he gave that student an excellent chocolate, one piece of chocolate. Then he asked that child, how are you? I am very, very happy. It is so nice. I love it. And she started eating. After a few minutes, some other girl came into the room. And to that girl, he gave 2 chocolates, same thing. And then he asked this first girl, how are you feeling now? Are you happy? No, I am not very happy. He says, why? No, you gave 2 chocolates to that girl. You gave only 1 chocolate to me. Actually, this is applicable to all of us. We become unhappy not because of what we have. We become unhappy with what we don't have. So this gratitude journal is one of the greatest tool to develop ourselves.
Yeah, that is it. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Thank you.
And one more thing I can tell you about that sacrifice, Yeah. See, actually, that sacrifice is a good example what happened to Abdul Kalam. See, they were sending this Aryabhatta, they were all working day and night. So one of the scientists, he was looking very sad. And he asked him, why are you sad? He says, no, nothing like that. Today is my daughter's birthday. So I will not be able to go. So I don't want to go. But I'm feeling a little sad that I don't want to go. But I want to see that this job is completed. So he completed the job. And when he went next day morning, he got a surprise. Abdul Kalam went in place of that engineer. He gave them a cake and he enjoyed. Right? So this person, this engineer, he sacrificed his personal interest for the office. This is a type of sacrifice which can be given as an example of professional related sacrifices. Right. I don't know whether it is right or not. I felt it's a good example of a sacrifice.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Anandji. Okay, so I think we'll wind up with that. Let us have the concluding prayer, and then we'll stop.